Hey everybody, how you doing? This is not going to be a long live stream, but I want to focus on the 2021 NFL draft, and I know this is already a draft year that we didn't really expect to have because, well, for a host of reasons that have to do with the pandemic. Um, but as you know, Mike Mayock, the Raiders general manager and former draftnik, gave a press conference last week and during that press conference he said, actually it was the week before, time flies, but Mayock said that he, among other things, he focused on how he was approaching the draft, and he did say, however, and he emphasized to start off that already it was a year like they didn't really expect it to be. And think about what's happened in the draft to this point already, with respect to leading up to the draft, I should say. Well, first of all, normally we would have had the NFL Combine by now in Indianapolis. We not only didn't have that, there was talk of having a virtual NFL Combine. I even came up with a plan that I introduced on Oakland News Now, but at the end of the day, the league didn't do anything except release a press released a press release that explained what pro dates were going to be held when, from now through April, May. And we already saw the pro day for Clemson's quarterback Trevor Lawrence. And I have to be honest, it really bothers me the gigantic level of public relations oriented media reporting that was done with respect to the Clemson quarterback. Yes, he's good. Yes, he's storied. Yes, he deserves all the seasonal accolades he received. But his pro day sucked. Okay? And it did because if you take a look at his throws inside the 25-yard line, he was consistently high. He was always overthrowing. And that was not lost on me at all. It was not lost on me at all. And I thought, wow, if this fellow doesn't correct that, given this topsy-turvy scheduling we already have, he runs the risk of going into training camp, maintaining that problem, and not having enough time to correct it. It was a big problem. And so I didn't mean to spend this much time talking about Trevor Lawrence, but even at this point, but I will, because there are a number of teams that are in the running for him. There's talk that even the Cowboys will trade up to try to get him or one of the great quarterbacks up there, maybe Zach Wilson. But I don't see, getting back to Trevor Lawrence, and I think this is pandemic related, he wasn't the quarterback I expected him to see. He had the right people helping him out at the pro day, but his performance just wasn't there. And yet, and I didn't see the original pro day performance that was on the NFL Network. I was doing other work related matters. But when I finally saw the video on YouTube, that was by the NFL Network, I kept thinking, okay, when is Lawrence going to throw an end zone pass that actually hits a receiver right in on the money rather than overthrowing? And I didn't see that. He was constantly overthrowing. I mean, he could have overthrown Russia. That's how bad it was. And is it correctable? Sure. But the whole point is, why is it happening? He was consistently throwing off his back foot. He was throwing his ball high, okay, as if he was trying to emphasize getting the ball over the line, the heads of the linemen, right? And he wasn't comfortable. Now, do I chalk that up to nerves? Sure. But look, I've been around enough to see some really great pro day performances. Jameis Winston's pro day performance was just boffo, okay? I mean, he cemented his number one status with his pro day. You didn't have to make up anything. I mean, it was quite obvious that the moniker that some gave him, the chosen one, fit. No question about it. But Trevor Lawrence, I didn't see that, okay? So, and I get what the hype is about. He's like Justin Herbert. He's tall, he can run, he throws generally well, and he can be effective. Is he the genius coverage reader? No. Do you draft him if you expect that kind of person? No. Does he come out of a system like Joe Burrow's? Not exactly. Okay? He's more along the lines of because they played for the same coach, right? Deshaun Watson. Very effective from different launch points. Will definitely get the ball there and can run if expected. But the intangibles, the expected leadership, he has those in droves, 100%. But do I believe that he is the person that should be the number one pick? No. And it's just like Joe Burrow. I wasn't sold on Joe Burrow. He had a great first year, but then he got injured. And now you're in the middle of a pandemic, and you remember you have to pay for that quarterback, okay? So what I think in that vein, talking about the Raiders now, the Raiders need to do and should do is they should trade down and stockpile cheaper draft picks and focus on free agency. Because look, the sponsorship money that's normally there for the Raiders, it's not going to be there this year. There's the bailout that was expected to come from the federal government that I don't know that's going to come yet. And we're in a situation where we're going to have to batten down the hatches until that relief comes. You can hope that it comes through increasing incomes, again, through government assistance from the American Rescue Act that's really focused on, getting money to the worker, right? But absent that, I just don't see that there's going to be that much money there for the Raiders to dip into paying the normal level of bonuses and fees that they pay off. This is going to be a batten down the hatches year. And if someone says it's not, well, hey, you know what? The onus is upon you to prove it. It's just not there. That money is just not there. And so in a lot of ways, it's a different situation than it was, or a similar situation, I should say, than it was when the Raiders found themselves with the responsibility of building their own stadium and collecting part of the bond money, the stadium hotel tax money, the part that was PAYGO that the Raiders collect the Stadco. They were expecting about $20 million more to come in than did come in, and it didn't happen. And so what did they do? They let go of Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper and then turned around and said that had nothing to do with the stadium. Now, look, nobody on the Raiders is going to basically admit what is obvious. You start looking at the figures between the bond issue and the responsibility of the Raiders to pay that as Stadco, all right, and their personnel obligations. They weren't being financed in such a way where they could say, okay, well, your football side is entirely different, and we're going to give you an unlimited amount of income to spend as you could with the players and all. That's not how it works, okay? And they had matters they had to deal with the roof later that some of the extra PSL money that they gained had to go to pay for. Remember, at the end of the day, the Raiders still had to pay back their $650 million line of credit from Bank of America, and they only have to do that within a short period of time. So it hasn't been a lucky period for the Raiders, all right? And And I'm not saying that with glee. I'm just being honest. And so you've got to ask yourself, okay, well, how do we draft players in this environment of what we call fiscal austerity? All right, and that question, and the answer to that question is, you go low. You go low. You have no other choice but to go low. Now, that said, who should the Raiders get? Who should they focus on? I think that from a free agency standpoint, there's one, I think, very tasty, because possible acquisition, and I think, I'd love to see Deshaun Jackson with the Raiders. Don't know if it'll happen, but Deshaun Jackson would be coming back to the West Coast. He would be right now. He would be an experienced, wildly crafty veteran speedster to really serve as a mentor for Henry Ruggs along with Nelson Aguilar, right? I think he would be a wonderful addition to the Raiders. And from the defensive standpoint, from the defensive perspective, I'm going to say something that might shock some people. I think the Raiders need to spend less time looking at new defensive personnel and more time looking at schemes that will stop the offenses the Raiders have faced. And if you're going to focus on getting defensive personnel, you need to get young people that can sit on the bench you can call up. Hopefully the NFL allows the Raiders to have more but cheaper players on the bench, because we're going to go through another round of testing and COVID-19 and emergency protocols and everything, although less so. The NFL's prime directive should be getting each and every NFL player and staffer vaccinated. That should be the National Football League's and the Raiders' primary objective. Everything else is secondary, because if they're all vaccinated, guess what? We have a greater probability that we don't see the interruptions and alterations in schedule that we saw last year, which at some points started us to think, hey, you know what? Will we actually finish the season? That was a big concern, right? The great news is that we're headed in that direction, but the objective should be to basically move the goalposts further up as close as possible to now. Knowing that you can't achieve it now just because of numbers, availability of the vaccine, and priority, right? But you got to try. And I think the NFL needs to be open about its fiscal issues, and it needs to work its politics, I think, to make sure that its needs are met. I think that what Roger Goodell did in terms of offering the stadiums for use to distribute the vaccine was a brilliant move, much needed, and they did it fast. They didn't wait for the Biden administration to ask. They just came up and offered, and that was outstanding, okay? Outstanding. So, but getting back to the Raiders and free agency, I think it's going to be a long season if they try, and it's going to be a fiscally harmful season if they try, the Raiders, to spend at the top and get a player that they haven't been able to see much of and isn't proven, right? They need to focus on players that are from big schools. They need to go back to a strategy I think that Reggie McKenzie did exceptionally well at. They found players that had little problems here and there, and they spent money on them. I don't think they should go drastic on those, but you should also look for people that just fall through the cracks in terms of analysis. There are going to be a lot of those. I mean, a lot. All right? and you can't really. It's hard to look at last year because, like for Cal, the Golden Bears had a weird season. New offensive coordinator, games that were canceled. It's very difficult to evaluate players in that environment. So you actually have to use a 2-year perspective. You have to say, what did they do not just last year, but the year before, right? And you have to essentially develop an average, because if you just try to go off the normal idea that their senior year is the best, you may come up wanting in terms of analysis. This is a difficult period. It really is. So that's my take on the Raiders. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. We'll see you.